Today, we are cracking open the book of life itself. We're going to dive deep into our DNA to understand a truly revolutionary science that's decoding our personal blueprint for health and disease. Let's get right into it. You know, it's one of the most fundamental questions in all of medicine. Think about it. For just about any condition, heart disease, diabetes, heck, even something like your height, there is just a massive amount of variation from person to person. For decades, scientists have been hunting for clues to this puzzle, and it turns out the answer has been hiding in plain sight this whole time. That's right, the clues are literally written into our genetic code, that 3 billion letter sequence that makes you, well, you. But with a code that vast, how on earth do you find the specific little parts that influence one particular trait? You'd need a search engine powerful enough to scan the entire globe. And, well, scientists have built one. And that brings us to the star of our explainer today. It's a revolutionary scientific tool designed to find these genetic clues on a massive global scale. It's called GWAS. A Genome-Wide Association Study, or GWAS for short, is basically a giant genetic detective story. Imagine you're playing a planet-wide game of Spot the Difference. But instead of looking at two pictures, you're comparing the DNA of thousands, sometimes even millions of people. The whole goal is to find these tiny little genetic differences that are more common in people who have a disease compared to those who don't. So, how does it actually work? Well, the process follows a pretty clear playbook. First up, researchers collect DNA samples and health info from huge groups of people, some with the condition they're studying and some without. Then, they use these amazing tools called microarrays to scan each person's entire genome for millions of genetic markers. And here's the crucial part, the statistical analysis. This is where they hunt for markers that show up way more often in the group with the disease. And finally, just to make absolutely sure it wasn't a fluke, they check their work by confirming the findings in a completely different group of people. And the scale of this effort, it's just staggering. I mean, to date, researchers have conducted over 5,700 of these studies. They've investigated the genetic links for more than 3,300 different human traits. This has created a map of our genetic landscape that's just completely unprecedented. Okay, so we've run thousands of these massive genetic hunts. What have we actually found? To really get the results, we first need to understand what a genetic clue even looks like. So the clues that GWAS hunts for are called SNPs. That stands for single nucleotide polymorphisms. Now, I know that sounds super complicated, but you can just think of them as common one-letter typos in our DNA code. These aren't necessarily mistakes or errors, they're just the tiny differences that make each of us unique. And they are the #1 target for GWAS. Now, scientists visualize all these results using a tool with a fantastic name, a Manhattan plot. And this here is a simplified version. Think of it like the skyline of our genome. Each of these bars is a chromosome, and the height tells you how strongly a SNP in that region is linked to the trait. The tallest skyscrapers you see? Those are the genetic hotspots that get scientists really, really excited. But here it is. This is the single biggest discovery that came out of all this research, a genuine game changer. For most common diseases, things like heart disease or diabetes, scientists didn't find one single gene for it. Nope. Instead, the risk is spread out all over the place. Just like this quote says, most traits are influenced by thousands of different genetic variants, and each one of them contributes just a tiny, tiny piece to the overall risk. So this distinction is absolutely crucial. Some diseases, like cystic fibrosis, are what we call monogenic. They're caused by one single, powerful mutation in just one gene. But most common traits are polygenic. Poly meaning many. They're the result of the combined, tiny effects of hundreds, maybe thousands of genes, all working together. Your height, your risk for type 2 diabetes, those are polygenic. It's a team effort, not a solo act. Okay, this is all fascinating science, right? But what does it actually mean for you? How do we take this mountain of data and turn it into something useful for your health in the real world? The key is something called a Polygenic Risk Score, or PRS. This is where all that GWAS data becomes practical. A PRS takes all those thousands of tiny genetic risk factors we talked about and combines them into one single personalized score that estimates your genetic predisposition for a specific disease. And the process for calculating it is actually pretty logical. First, scientists take the results from a huge GWAS study. That tells them how much risk each little SNP adds.
Then they look at your personal DNA to see which of those SNPs you happen to carry. They simply add up all those little effects, and there you have it, your polygenic risk score.
And these scores can be powerful. I mean, really powerful. Take glaucoma, for example. Research has shown that people who are in the top 10% of the polygenic risk score distribution have a 4.2 times higher risk of developing the disease compared to everybody else. Now, that is a significant piece of information that could totally change how we approach screening and prevention.
And this is so important to understand. We need to be clear on what a PRS is and what it isn't. It is not a diagnosis. It is not your destiny. The absolute best analogy is to think of it like a weather forecast. A forecast can tell you there's a high chance of rain, which gives you a heads up to maybe bring an umbrella. In the same way, a high PRS tells you your genetic risk is elevated, empowering you and your doctor to take preventative action. It's about probability, not destiny.
This technology holds incredible promise, but it is definitely not without its challenges. There are some really important caveats and pretty big scientific hurdles we have to talk about as we move forward.
But for this incredible technology to work for everybody, we have to ask a really critical question. Whose DNA are we actually studying in the first place?
The answer, unfortunately, is not great. This chart shows that a staggering 78% of all participants in Genome-Wide Association Studies have been of European ancestry. This lack of diversity isn't just a small issue, it's a massive scientific problem for the entire field. And the direct consequence of that is a really serious health equity issue. Because the underlying data is so biased, the tools that are built from it, like polygenic risk scores, are most accurate for people of European descent. Their predictive power drops off significantly for other populations, which means the benefits of this incredible technology are just not being shared equally.
And beyond that huge diversity problem, scientists are also grappling with other major hurdles. You've got complex statistical challenges like population stratification, which is basically when hidden differences in ancestry can create false signals that lead researchers down the wrong path. There's also the biological challenge of figuring out what all these thousands of genes are actually doing. And of course, there are massive ethical issues around privacy, consent, and how we responsibly use our most personal data.
But even with these challenges, the future is incredibly exciting. The goal for the next 15 years or so is to use these detailed genetic maps not just for predicting risk, but to discover entirely new drug targets and to really usher in an era of truly personalized medicine, one that's tailored to an individual's unique genetic makeup. And that really brings us to our final thought. GWAS has given us this powerful new lens to read our own instruction manual. The technology is just advancing at a breathtaking pace. So the ultimate question for all of us is, how do we steer this revolution? How do we make sure this knowledge benefits all of humanity, fairly and equally? That's the challenge and the promise of the code in our code. Thanks for joining us.